Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing very well today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today on the Voice of Yoga, we will talk about applying the real estate advice of not fixing what isn't broke as the divine principle understood. Listen as we explore the operation of the divine principle of oneness to the mental material concept of human existence. In this show, we will discuss the difference between mortal sense and spiritual truth. This is from Mary Baker Eddy, Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, page 167, line 6. We apprehend life in divine science only as we live above corporeal sense and correct it. End of quote. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and live above corporeal sense and correct it. Swami, the title of today's show is Don't Fix What Isn't There. Let's talk about that title.
Yeah, if you start with the idea God is all and all is absolute good. What is this world of good and evil? Why do we have to fix anything? Life is perfect, whole, complete, eternal, and changeless. So what is this mental material appearance? Because in it, none of these divine qualities are upheld. And so at some point, you really get to the understanding that what is appearing in the five material senses isn't real. Now, of course, until we have this divine revelation, we live as if this mortal sense of life is for real. And we experience all of the problems most of us are struggling with. But as we educate our thought up to spiritual apprehension, and we start to see this human sense of life is just a belief. And it's a belief in something other than the divine creation. And if we could at some point loose our identity from the mental material concept and then become a faithful witness to what is invisible and intangible to the material senses, and we experience this birth of Christ in consciousness, where divine truth reveals itself to us from within. And from that revelation, you really start to understand what we're doing is we're trying to fix or figure out how the unreal became real.
So Swami, so say we are having a great day or life is good, we don't have any problems, and we think it's maybe because of some strategies that we have employed humanly. Now that's also a belief system as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what we have learned with thought and with belief, we can manage this false sense of existence. We can change finite bad to finite good. Most of us, we're happy if we can get more of the pleasures and profits of this human experience until eventually it fails. Because you're in the cycle of death and rebirth. You're under the law of karma. The law of karma is really the love of God. The divine principle will not let us accept anything less than the perfection of being. And so problems appear until eventually you get to the point where you've had enough.
So when we notice these problems may pop up, what do you recommend that we do about it? How should we handle it? Is there a procedure?
Yeah, well, what we're learning now is to use the testimony of your material senses as the check engine light on the dashboard of consciousness. All the good, beautiful, and true attributes belong to the divine creation. It's like Mary Baker Eddy says in Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, sometimes beautiful, always erroneous. What is appearing in the material senses is not the divine creation, and therefore it's not under the government of divine law. What is appearing in the material senses is a divided consciousness. It is what has separated from the unified state, manifested in half, and has a complementary unmanifested other part. That's the mental, material world of energy that we initially believe is real. And so once we educate ourselves to get to the point where you're able to start to accept this finite, limited, mortal sense of life isn't life. It isn't what Jesus was calling life. It isn't what the Upanishads is calling life. Life is eternal, changeless, absolute. It's spiritual. It's indivisible. And so as we begin to, again, educate our thought up to being able to accept what is appearing in the material senses isn't real, then we can walk reason through the open door of revelation and know the truth, which will make us free from the belief we are a finite mortal being.
So when we have a problem that crops up, do we just look at this problem and say, well, this can't be real in a spiritual sense. I'm only experiencing this as my human existence. And then from there, do we kind of allay this error?
Yeah, but it's way more complicated than just denying the testimony of your material senses. In order to follow the instruction, we apprehend life in divine science only as we live above corporeal sense and correct it. Very important thing. You deny the testimony of the senses, but at the same time, you keep your mind in constant relation with the divine idea. We must affirm the truth. We must know the truth, which means we must be conscious of the divine creation. There are hundreds of people that have read Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures. And because of attaining this inner revelation, were able to heal themselves. People went to the medicine cabinet and threw all their medications away. Then there were thousands of people who read about the people who read Science and Health and went to the medicine cabinet and threw all their medications away and had a relapse. Now, the difference here is if you do not have conscious awareness of the divine creation, then you are not under the protection of divine law. And you have to continue to practice. And like we say, practice makes perfect only when practice is perfect. You must educate your thought up to spiritual apprehension. You must know God aright. You have to understand that God did not create this world. God could not create something that is a mix of good and evil. Jesus tells us to seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. Well, heaven is the divine creation. It's absolute goodness. It's eternal life without opposite. And John tells us for us to worship God, we must worship God in spirit and in truth. So we have to come out of the belief that we're a finite mortal being before we qualify to have the Christ And again, some people think Jesus equals Christ. Well, Jesus is the manifestation of the Christ. But Christ is an eternal principle. Christ is the Messiah. Christ is what makes the divine creation comprehensive to human consciousness. It's the interface. And like we have said in previous shows, use the story of Lazarus in the Bible to help you understand how to get the birth of Christ in your consciousness. Because before Christ can come to Lazarus, Lazarus must be put in the tomb. The purified human consciousness must be buried in the silence and stillness of divine revelation before Christ can call him out. And the Lazarus that comes out of the tomb is not the same as the Lazarus that went into the tomb. It's kind of like the difference between a caterpillar and a butterfly. The caterpillar goes into the chrysalis, but it doesn't come out another caterpillar. It comes out a butterfly. The human in the adult state has divine qualities. It now has identity with the divine self, the spiritual body.
So, Swami, how would we know that we really spiritually know God aright, or we just think we know God aright?
Yeah, consciousness is experience. You use what is appearing in your material senses to give you clues as to what you are conscious of. Now, we know divine truth in consciousness must externalize as divine qualities. That's why Christian Science is so powerful, because Mary Baker Eddy put healing on the table. She pretty much tells us if you cannot heal the sick, reform sinner, raise the dead, you do not understand yourself spiritually. It's very possible to think that you are spiritual. And even when you drill down with this, you find that healing isn't the end-all, be-all either, because in Revelations in the Bible, looks like a lamb, speaks like a dragon. With thought and belief, we can change finite bad to finite good. But you're still under the law of karma. You still have a belief in matter. And you haven't transcended the false sense of self. We did that one radio show where we talked about looking to heaven while clinging to earth. We still keep this grip on the false sense of self. Now, I'm not saying you throw the baby out with the bathwater, because the physical body does have a purpose. It's the monitor. Without a physical body, how would we know whether we were conscious of the divine principle or we were still being individualized by the world mind? We were under the government of the dragon and two beasts. And so by using the testimony of your senses, and like Mary Baker Eddy said, to live above corporeal sense and correct it. Very important point here is that you graduate from your belief in divine creation, the perfection of being, and then your belief graduates to faith. Faith is where your conscious awareness of this divine principle begins to externalize in your experiences. You're starting to see the fruits of your labor. And that gives you an evidence procedure. And once you start to demonstrate this divine law, then you become more and more proficient at it, and your faith graduates to understanding, where you're able to demonstrate divine law with scientific certainty.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. Listeners will be back with you in just a few moments. Kriya Yoga Theory 2 is a unique and revolutionary practice and forum designed to facilitate the growth process in human development. Apotheosis is a real experience and has an evidence procedure. You cannot lead someone to permanent change by doing for them what they must do themselves. Personal accountability and responsibility are the foundation of Kriya Yoga Theory 2. You must be engaged and devoted. Prana power brings virtue to overcome fear, wisdom to overcome ignorance, purpose to overcome selfishness, enthusiasm to overcome laziness. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. These sessions are a celestial positioning system to guide the individual into union with the divine. For more information or to sign up for your next session online, go to www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you're listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, it seems like we're caught in this trap of what you always say, how the unreal became real. So instead of knowing the truth, this is what we're doing as humanity collectively. So how can we bring freedom to get us out of this trap?
Yeah. One of the things I always work with is this idea of educating thought up to spiritual apprehension, using what is visible and tangible, and also what is invisible but tangible to help me understand what is invisible and intangible. Now, it's always going to fall short of the mark when you're trying to understand the absolute in relative terms. But relativity is something, if you begin to understand that a little bit, and I really like the Ben Franklin, for the want of a nail, a shoe is lost. For the want of a shoe, a horse is lost. For the want of a horse, a rider is lost. For the want of a rider, a platoon is lost. For the want of a platoon, a battle is lost. For the want of a battle, the war is lost. Something as insignificant as the loss of a nail, we find something as monumental as the loss of a war. And the spiritual antidote could be found in the Chinese proverb. When there's light in the soul, there's beauty in the person. When there's beauty in the person, there's harmony in the home. When there's harmony in the home, there's honor in the nation. When there's honor in the nation, there's peace in the world. Again, relativity. Get the light in the soul. And what does that look like when you're doing it? Because when spirit is cause, creation is perfect.
So, Swami, I'm getting the idea, in order to get the light in the soul, we have to first figure out, by being caught in the trap, we've got to figure out how this unreal became real.
Well, maybe not exactly figure out how the unreal became real, because that's what we're doing collectively today. That's what the medical community is doing. We have to let go of the belief that there is a finite mortal sense of life. And you can use terms like sin, missing the mark, or avidya, mistaking the impermanent for the permanent. Or even what the Tibetans say, you need the finger to point to the moon. But it is woe unto them who mistaken the finger for the moon, for they will never understand the bright light of the moon, nor what a finger is. This is ignorance. Ignorance is basically this darkness that we live in. It's a mortal sense of life. And we don't have to figure it out. What we have to do is come out of the belief that it exists. In order to do that, you're going to need a metaphysical or a mystical system. You really are going to have to master the mind-body complex, because only reason walks through the open door of revelation. And so by employing strategies where you learn how to control how you think. A great thing is pranayama in Kriya Yoga, the relationship between breath and thought, and how to use breath patterns to control energy levels of the mortal sense of life. We know the physical body isn't real. We know it's a mental image. But without it, how would we know if we were conscious of the truth? That's why Jesus said, "Now it is day, and I must do the work of him that has sent me. Soon it will be night when no one can work." So to use the mind-body complex, to attune the mind-body complex to the divine idea as preparation for this resurrection of consciousness. Because like Mary Baker Eddy said, we must live above corporeal sense. And how do we do that? We come out of the finite mortal sense of life, and we accept spiritual identity.
Swami, I see we have a soundbite here from Herb Fitch, and this is from Realization of Oneness, Class 15B. Maybe we could play that now?
Yeah, and if anybody's interested in the full audio file or the complete program, you can get this at mysticalprinciples.com, and I'll play it.
These men were not Jesus Christ, and yet look what they did. They had risen to the point where for them there was no material law. They had found the spiritual kingdom on earth within themselves as the very Spirit of God itself. They were sons of God. But before they learned that they were sons of God, before they demonstrated that they were sons of God, even while they were stumbling, trying to find the way, even while they were in error, they were sons of God, but didn't know it. It was only when they learned that they were that the power flowed, but always they were the sons of God. You never become it. You learn that you are it. And as the conviction takes root, you refuse to be something else. So that the moment you say, well, if I'm the Son of God, why shall I be a dying creature? I can't be. How can the Son of God be a dying creature? Who is this creature who will lay down the form? Something enables you to step out of that concept into the land of truth where there is no material law, where all is governed on a divine law, on the place whereon thou stand. This sounds mundane, but it continues Joel's thought. Always remember this. You are not suffering from rheumatism. You're not suffering from a cold, a headache, or unemployment. You are not. You are suffering from the universal acceptance that the carnal mind is a power. Carnal mind, presenting to you a condition, is universally accepted to be a truth, and you are accepting that carnal mind's projection to you. It says you are this, you are that, you are the other. It says everything except you are the Son of God. And you say, that's right, I'm unemployed, I'm lacking, I'm limited. And because it didn't tell you you're the Son of God, you just let it go by, and you're not the Son of God as far as you're concerned. The idea never enters your mind, because it's not in the carnal mind to begin with. And then the false power, the belief that the carnal mind's projection to you is the truth, this is what you suffer from. And the suffering is in the carnal mind in you. It seems to be a state of your selfhood, but you've got the wrong self there. Christ is not unemployed. Christ is not limited or lacking. The Son of God is none of these things. You're simply not being the right self. And so you'll go out to get rid of the problem of the lack or limitation or unemployment and keep the false self. Whereas the solution being given to us here is get rid of the false self. And with it go all of its problems, because there are no material laws to the Son of God. And God is abundance. God is self-fulfillment. Always, the higher level then of this teaching is, still on the human sense of things, get out of the human you, which suffers from the human problem, or the human problems. Get out of the self that is not you. Don't bother to correct the errors of that self, but get out of the self which contains the errors. Spiritual identity, Son of God, understood, practiced, realized, accepted, is not ignoring God, but accepting God's presence where you are. And then don't be surprised if the condition disappears. But it won't disappear as a permanent dispensation while you are still Johnny Smith, the physical man born of Mary Smith, my mother. You've got to be spirit, never born, never dying, realize. And until you know what that is and experience that, expect the form to be sick, unemployed, limited, lacking, all of the ups and downs of the carnal mind. Because those powers of carnal mind will always function on a human being. The Christ teaching is not about human beings. It's about the Christ. Speaking of accepting the carnal mind as a power, Joel says, consciously or unconsciously, you have accepted two powers. The power of God and the power of error, which is called carnal mind. And to nullify error in your experience, see through the belief that the carnal mind is power. And if we're doing anything, it's this, to emphasize that you cannot see through that belief as a human being. Everyone who's tried it has failed. The only way you'll see through that belief is to know yourself. Only yourself, Christ, will see through that belief.
Swami, so how do we come out from being under this jurisdiction of material law?
Well, I think our biggest error is the insistence on keeping the false sense of self. And I have something here from Mary Baker Eddy, Miscellany, page 242, and I'll read it. You are scientifically correct in your statement about yourself. You can never demonstrate spiritually until you declare yourself to be immortal and understand that you are so. Christian Science is absolute. It is neither behind the point of perfection nor advancing towards it. It is at this point and must be practiced therefrom. Unless you fully perceive that you are the child of God, hence perfect, you have no principle to demonstrate and no rule for its demonstration. By this, I do not mean that mortals are the children of God. Far from it. In practicing Christian Science, you must state its principle correctly, or you forfeit your ability to demonstrate it. End of quote. Yeah, it all seems so paradoxical. You are the divine self, perfect, whole, complete. But for you to experience this divine self, the you that is seeking, trying, striving, struggling, planning, protecting, must be mastered and walk through the open door of revelation. We can't just put off the old man. We must know the truth. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do we know the truth and then let go of this false sense of existence? Because until Christ calls us out of the tomb, we're pretty much still under the jurisdiction of the law of karma.
Mary Baker Eddy said, you must state its principle correctly. What is that? What does she mean by that?
The divine principle is the law of one perfect divine life. And to communicate with that, you must be in oneness. When she says you must declare yourself to be immortal, you must understand that you are spirit. And spirit is everywhere, always, indivisible. There's only one. And to be conscious of that is very different than a human thinking about it. Because you must be in spiritual identity to know the truth, and then you must prove it.
Well, we do have to end our program for today. Listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. On any of the pages, when you scroll down, you'll see several buttons there that you can press to further your understanding. Swami, any final thoughts about today's show?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and live above corporeal sense and correct it.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton, along with Swami Jayananda, signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga kind of day. Namaste.